This is The Pursuit, where top performers in sport share what drives them. Brought to you by Audi, the official innovation partner of Sky Sports. Today on The Pursuit, we're joined by one of English rugby's most electric players. He's been a Lion, a World Cup finalist, and now he's a man charting a new path beyond the game. From thrilling finishes to hard-fought returns, he's mastered performance through persistence. Please welcome Anthony Watson. Anthony, let's start with the very early days and kind of growing up and how big a part sport played in your childhood.
Yeah, it was massive. My old man played rugby, or he says he played rugby at Saracens, but no one there's ever heard of him, or I can't see his name anywhere, so he might be lying. But it was always he was always a big influence on me. Whatever he was doing, I wanted to do. Whatever he was into, I wanted to be into. And then, my older brother started playing rugby and, he was doing pretty well. And, it's like sibling rivalry. I just wanted to outdo him and do what he was doing, but better. And it played a massive role, 100%. My mum wasn't a massive sports fan, especially not rugby. She's, from Nigeria, where rugby is pretty unheard of. So, she was into very different things, very education focused. So I was lucky to have a blend of both sides of it, I guess. Yeah,
you get that balance of education and the sport as well. Rugby particularly, because you were multi-sport, kind of had multi-sport talents, didn't you? So
that's generous.
But you played a lot of sport, like generally, but rugby was the focus.
Yeah, definitely. There was a period, to be honest with you, where I was playing rugby and football and I was taking them probably equally seriously, but I think it was partially, I knew that my dad loved rugby more, that made me want to try a bit harder at rugby. And then things just came a lot more naturally to me playing rugby. So it became quite straightforward that this is the path I wanted to go down in terms of, choosing which sport I was going to take seriously. So, yeah, but it was, again, it was because of my older brother as well, him doing well at it and my dad, being buzzing and being proud that my older brother's doing well. I was like, well, I want that same feeling, so let me chase after that as well.
As one of three boys, there is going to be that competition there. And the reason I said about those multiple sports is, wasn't one of the first things you did in terms of sporting achievement break your own brother's record at school?
Yeah, that was the single most nervous I've ever been in my entire sporting career. Yeah, he had the 100-metre record at the school and, it was a big thing made of it. I don't know how long it was standing before he broke it, and there was a bit of expectation around it. And at sports day at the school I went to, everyone was there, everyone's parents were there, and I was absolutely bricking it, to be honest with you. So if I didn't win, I'm not sure I could have gone home that evening. Yeah, I managed to break it, and I let him know very early doors that it was over for him.
Were you all as competitive as each other, or were you, as the middle child, tends to be the kind of the competitive one?
I think we were equally competitive, but I struggled really with kind of keeping that emotion in. So I was a bad loser. There's videos and stuff of me racing with my cousins and my brothers, and as soon as I realise I'm not winning, I've swerved to the left and I'm crying my eyes out. Like, I don't know. It wasn't a good trait to have. But no, we were equally competitive, I think. I was just very emotional.
Yeah. And did that stick with you in some way, that kind of sore loser mentality?
I think so. I think it did. I think the emotional side eventually went the complete other way, to almost feeling not happy, obviously losing, but it was, I managed to kind of detach the emotion from it a bit better as I got through my career. But definitely in my early stages, it was the emotional side of it was a big driver, and it probably, like I said, it probably took it too far, and that's why I struggled a lot with nerves and stuff like that before games, because I was so emotional. There's so much riding on it. Well, there wasn't, but I felt like there was so much riding on it that it probably got the better of me.
Well, that can be personal as well as external, can't it? The kind of pressure that you put on yourself. In terms of those early lessons that you learned about your performance and how to perform best under scrutiny and under that pressure, what do you think you learned early on, either learned yourself or learned from your brothers, and particularly your older brother, Marcus, that you could take forward into your career?
I think my dad always drove into me about trying to take the opportunity that's in front of you, and it won't it might not come again. And he always drove about, being in it and being aggressive with whatever you've got. So that's definitely something I picked up pretty early on. But yeah, I would say that that's the main one, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and in terms of that rivalry, there's an Olympic silver medalist in the family. Who's the apple of your dad's eye now?
Well, both my brothers actually work with my old man now, so I think that they've got the title, and I'm in third place these days. So it's a tough spot to be in. But
you had so much success early on, made your debut at 17. Were you prepared, do you think, to take that step at that time?
I think this is where I was really lucky, to be honest with you. I was lucky that my older brother was in the same system that I was in, but more advanced. He was further down the line. So him and some of his friends probably made the mistakes that I would have made, but luckily he was there to kind of prevent me from doing it. He'd been through it. He knew what the pitfalls were, and having him go through that journey definitely saved me a lot of heartache and a lot of probably issues with older guys in the team, because at that age, it's sort of 15 through to 18, I thought I was the man, to be honest with you. So,
everybody does 15 to 18.
Yeah. So that was huge, and credit to him, because it would be easy just to kind of, I think, let your little brother figure it out for himself, but he didn't want to do that. He wanted to make sure that I was in as good a position as I could be to make the most of the opportunity, and also not kind of disappoint the family name, I guess.
but there's so many ways in which you grow up really quickly throughout that system, especially when you've started so young. Yeah,
definitely. I think the big one for me going into that kind of men's environment was, similar to what I was talking about, the emotional side of it. I remember there was one session where I dropped probably like 4 or 5 balls, and my head had exploded. Like, I was trying to avoid. It was basically they were kicking off, and I was going to the other side of the pitch to avoid the kickoffs because I didn't want to catch the ball and stuff like that. And I was so afraid to make mistakes. And then you fast forward to the end of your career and you realise that those things are actually what make you better. Putting yourself in positions to make mistakes is actually how you improve. And I think being subjected to that early, as opposed to at 21, 22, fast-tracked me a little bit. But also, I was fortunate to have coaches who were just chucked me in there. My last year of school, Tuesdays I wasn't at school, I was training with the first team. And, when you're around 35-year-old men at 17, you realise you've got to grow up pretty quick, and you can't crack the same jokes with your schoolmates you can with these lads. So it's a bit different, yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of learning that lesson, you talked about the senior players around you. Do you think that, or was it them advising you about putting yourself in a position to make mistakes, or is that something is it a realisation that you came to yourself?
It was probably a realisation I came to myself, because no one knew what I was doing at the time. I was trying to be subtle, whether they did or didn't. No one ever came and spoke to me about why you're going to the other side of the pitch. I was saying, oh, no, I prefer being on the left wing, but really I was just trying to avoid the kickoffs. So it was something I came to realise myself, but it was a good few years after that. It wasn't like a light bulb moment. It takes, a bit of maturity for sure, and it takes just being in and around high performance, I guess.
And the other thing that is that, you start so early and you feel as though your career is laid out in front of you, and you can see, and you've always been very ambitious, haven't you, in terms of what you wanted to achieve in your career. But then there are setbacks along the way, particularly with the injuries that you've had. I think I've heard you sort of list them before, and yeah. it sounds like a medical textbook.
Yeah, we don't have all day to go through those. Yeah. So,
but you have to have so much resilience in order to keep your focus throughout those periods. Everybody talks about the mental side of being injured and how difficult that is.
Yeah, it is. It is really tough. I normally break it down into, the 3 big injuries I had was my Achilles twice, my knee, and then my back at the end. And I learnt so much more, or so many different things throughout each injury. The Achilles one in particular was really, really hard, because it was 13 months. I was mid-20s, probably at, the height, I'd guess, of my career, everything feeling great. And then, I rupture my Achilles playing for England. And then 4 months later in the rehab, I re-rupture it. And I guess throughout that process, I learned that, one, things can change so quickly. You can never get too high or too low. And then I also realised that, you've got to absolutely make the most of every opportunity. And that was a big one in the Achilles. I was like, look, if this injury does end my career, which at some points I thought it was going to, I don't want it to be because of the fact that I didn't try my best or do absolutely everything I could. So I went absolutely crazy, to be honest with you. I was doing everything I could to get back from that, and unfortunately I did. And then the knee injury it came at a point in my career where I was, between contracts almost. I was leaving Bath to go to Leicester. And so I was really able to just completely focus on myself for the first time, I guess, in my career for 10 months. And I did it outside of the club, which was, in my opinion, the absolute best thing I could have done, because, I absolutely honed in on everything and learned so much about the process, not just from a physical perspective, which is important, but also from a mental side of it, and giving yourself a bit of room to be upset and be unhappy, but then make sure that when Monday comes around, you're back on it. And then the back one is probably, not the hardest, but it ultimately ended my career, but it was the most emotional, because I realised around how important family is, and, sport is there and it's gone, but your family is always around. And they were with me throughout all of those injuries and through the back one. And, whilst it wasn't my decision to retire in the end, I'm very grateful it wasn't, because I probably would have jeopardised my family life for, pursuing sporting goals. And ultimately that's definitely the wrong way to go about things, in my opinion.
You said in your statement when you announced your retirement, this is not a sob story. This is not a career that's been defined by injuries. There have been some very high moments in your career as well. And I wonder if maybe two of the defining moments, and the two really in terms of selection for the British and Irish Lions and wearing that red shirt, how much did that mean to you?
It's incredible. I think it's only once I've stopped and all the Lions chat has come back up that I'm able to really look back and be like, it was unbelievable. I look back to the second test in New Zealand, and obviously we've lost the first one. And, with everything that happened in that game, with, getting smoked in the head by Sonny Bill, to going off, to coming back on, to winning the game, and then, walking over and seeing my parents halfway across the world, coming to watch their son play for the Lions. That was probably my proudest moment, to be honest with you, was being able to share that with them. And, I look even further back to my first introduction to the Lions, and it was with my dad in the morning. It was probably 7, 8 a.m. watching the Lions and that 2005 tour, I think it was, to New Zealand. So, go full circle and have my dad there supporting me, and my mum was after everything that happened in that game, that was amazing.
But also, like you said in the game, it's not all positive moments, but it's almost like the most complete introduction to a Lions tour that you could have had.
Yeah, for sure. But I think the bad times make the good times so much better. And, losing the first test and then winning the second one, it's backs up against the wall. And then that feeling is right now we're on. And that's what we want from Lions tours. You want them to be exciting, and that's why everyone plays sport, is for the drama. And now I can't speak highly enough of that trip in particular, but going on a second one was amazing. I know it was in COVID, which took a lot of the joy out of it, to be honest with you. But the Lions is so special, and it has to stay in professional rugby as long as it can, because it's genuinely unique. And I know it's a bit of a cliche, but you do feel part of something so much bigger than just what you're playing in. You've got 4 nations, and the same people who were booing you in the 6 nations are now cheering you. Is weird, but it's so amazing. What
do you think then it takes to be a Lions player? There are so many. I mean, obviously everybody will have different individual qualities, but is there a common thread, you think, that unites Lions players?
I think so, yeah. I think that ultimately the rugby side of it takes care of itself. You're not going to get picked for the Lions if you're a rubbish player. I think you have to be a good person and a good team man. You can't be one of those who gets dropped and then trains at 20% and then doesn't show up to the function or anything like that. You've got to think wider than just yourself, and you've got to be fun to be around. You can't be, it sounds very contradictory, but you can't be the ultra 110% professional on a tour like that, because there's so much of it that's relying on relationship forming, and sometimes that involves a fair bit of alcohol. So you have to have a bit of a balance going into a tour like that, and ultimately I think the best Lions are obviously unbelievable rugby players, but great people.
I think the way you're describing it sounds like that balance between professionalism and being a good tourist, particularly because I know you were talking about your parents coming over to see you, but mostly on a tour, you're away from your family, your friends, your club structure, your sort of everyday support system. You have to provide that for each other.
Yeah, for sure. But even the success of the team is predicated on, relationship forming. So everyone buys into wanting to win the series, but it takes a lot more than just 15 men just doing their job to win, down in Australia, down in New Zealand, wherever it is. It actually takes, caring about each other and working that little bit more. I know, again, these are cliches, but it's very few times do I use it talking about a team, but with the Lions, it actually is the most black and white I've ever seen it, across any team I've been involved with. So, no, it's definitely important. You have to really get to know each other and kind of strive for the bigger goal. But then there's also, smaller things within that, like get lifelong friends and all that types of bits that the Lions. I could talk all day about the Lions. Like honestly, it's unreal.
Who were the players, particularly on that tour of New Zealand? Who were the players that you were able to lean on? Who are those lifelong friends from that squad?
Oh, there's a few. I probably went into the tour with the wrong mindset. Like I was like, I won't be friends with him, won't be friends with him. We'll be friends with him, won't be friends with him. And one of them...
Were they generally props?
Yeah. Well, the hygiene's a bit questionable. I'm not really with that. So one of them was Tyg Furlong. I was like, listen, he's a farmer from Wexford. I'm from near London. Probably into very different things. We won't be mates. And then fast forward 5 weeks after the tour, and we're part of a group in Vegas together, and still speak to him to this day. Guys like that, you can't go into it thinking these are going to be my mates and these aren't. Tig's definitely one. Toby Faletau was another. I was fortunate enough to have grown up with Jonathan Joseph, and then we had gone on that journey together, and having him there was huge, especially because, unfortunately he wasn't playing in the tests, and he was kind of able to probably, it sounds deep, but it's not that deep, but he was able to give it me advice from a place of care as opposed to worrying about himself. So having him there was definitely helpful, especially at a young age, when you can't necessarily think too much for yourself.
It's okay if it's deep.
Yeah.
But in terms of that dressing room balance, and you talk about the relationship building, whatever, does it need to be harmonious, the dressing room? Does everybody need to get on? Is that important, do you think?
I think it's important to an extent. I don't think it's the be-all and end-all. There's definitely situations where people weren't friends, but they don't let it affect the team, which I think is the ultimate. You can't let it affect the team's ability to win games and stuff like that, and or affect others too much. So I think it's very, very important. And to be honest with you, across the two tours I was on, there was very few instances of any issues, to be honest with you. Everyone got on pretty well. So harmony is important, but when you get 32 guys together, there's inevitably going to be some issues. So you just got to ride it out and make sure that it doesn't impact the success of the team.
What advice would you give to someone like Henry Pollock, who's going out at 20?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone like him going off on their first Lions tour?
I think that given 4 years ago there was no fans in there, I would say just fully immerse yourself in the whole experience. And, it can be easy from a professional sportsman perspective to say, oh no, I don't want to get in and amongst the fans and all that. I want to worry about the game on Tuesday or Saturday or wherever it is. But I think the Lions is an exception to that rule, and I think that fully getting in and amongst it with everyone, I think is what makes that tour so special. So I would just say to him, the rugby stuff, he's a joke, so he'll take care of that. But I'd say the experience, don't let it just pass you by, because it's special.
I think that's a really interesting point to make about recognising those moments in your career that aren't stepping stones, that are the key moments that you just have to live them.
Yeah, you have to enjoy them. And there was probably instances of mine where I wasn't able to enjoy it as much as I wanted to, but the Lions definitely wasn't. You know, I absolutely loved it, and I'm sure the boys this summer will have that same experience because, you know, I can't speak about it enough. It's just so good.
And they just have to live it to fully experience it and to make sure that they have those great memories in the way that you do. I want to ask you about the World Cup final in 2019, because was there a chance that you almost didn't make it because you wouldn't have been playing rugby?
Yeah, there was a chance. Do you mean because of the NFL?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was... I think after that Lions tour, I started speaking to some guys in the NFL, and it was a real passion of mine. My missus is from the States, so we kind of shared a joy for watching American football. And, you know, I wanted to test myself against some of the best athletes in the world, and I thought, why not? At the age I was at, it was the perfect opportunity to do it. And then I ruptured my Achilles, and from that moment, you know, like I said earlier, the light bulb moment, I was like, look, I need to give everything I've got to getting back fit and playing this sport and maximising everything. But no, I was very, very close. And, you know, I would have loved to have tried it, but can't go back and change that now. And I think that in retrospect as well, you know, if Christian Wade and guys like that can't do it, I don't know who can.
But also, you can't do everything. So if you take that path, and you end up going to try your hand at NFL, you don't play in a World Cup final.
No, exactly, 100%. Yeah, that's the right way of looking about it. The World Cup one was, you know, that whole experience was, emotionally driven because of, you know, the Achilles and stuff like that, but also a little bit because of, you know, having that opportunity to maybe go to the NFL, tearing my Achilles, and then having all of that in one. Which is why you probably saw me crying after semi-final,
But that's the way you describe it. That is so understandable. There is so much going on for you at that point that you, and before you get to that stage of crying after the semi-final, you've got to get yourself mentally ready for that game to go and win a World Cup semi-final. How do you even start to do that?
Yeah, I was really lucky, to be honest with you, that I worked with a sports psych who gave me a lot of tools to work with, and he kind of changed the way that I looked at playing those big pressure games. So that whole World Cup period was probably the most relaxed I've gone into any game in my life, because I know there was, like I said, there was a lot of emotion behind it, but I felt like I had done the work, and that gave me so much peace of mind. Everyone dreams of playing in these situations. Everyone dreams of playing in World Cup quarters, World Cup semis. So I really didn't want to let any kind of nerves or anything ruin that moment for me. So I just played with complete freedom and was just like, what's the worst that can happen? Unfortunately, the final was the worst that could happen.
But it's a World Cup final. I mean, there are levels that we're talking about here. So, Anthony, this is your chance to build the ultimate rugby player. Find out who's got the pace, the vision, the steel, in the same way that Audi brings together ambitious design, advanced technology and powerful performance to create cars that thrill and impress. We are looking for intelligence, performance and precision. You are valid choice in any one of these categories, if you like. No false modesty. If you're the right person, you have to put yourself into these categories. The first one is acceleration and agility.
I've got to go with my hero here, Jason Robinson. Yeah. He got me into rugby, watching him play in 2003, so you can't look past him, can you?
Yeah, just that burst of speed, that ability to sort of change everything, I suppose.
Exactly. Different level, honestly. He was an absolute joke.
So tell me about watching him when you were growing up and how he got you into rugby.
It was more just the excitement, you know, whenever, like you said, whenever he got the ball, there was expectation. People sat on the edge of their seats, you know, thinking something was going to happen. And, you know, it helped, to be honest with you, that he looked similar to me. And, you know, I just wanted to be like him. To be honest with you, I wanted to play the game like him. I wanted to look like him. What his haircut was, I wanted to do the same. And, you know what it's like as a kid, you're impressionable. And, yeah, he was the one for me.
Yeah. Next one, game intelligence, someone who's got vision on the pitch.
It's a tough one. It's been between two of my England teammates, George Ford and Owen Farrell. I don't think I can choose between the two of them. I'm going to have to go with both of them. Both very different players, but both absolute geniuses in their own right. I think the way Fordy sees the game 2 phases ahead is different level, and then Faz brings that, I guess, emotional intelligence as well, and that leadership characteristic which probably falls into the same category. So they're both ridiculous, and I would put them as, they're both in the top 3 fly halves England have ever had.
Footwork and flair.
Footwork and flair. Oh.
See, I think you could put yourself in it.
No. I think this one's got to go to Cheslin Colby. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's. I think for someone his size to dominate the way he does is special, and not just his footwork. That is obviously undoubtedly what makes him him. But his all-round game is ridiculous. But I've seen him make people look very, very, very silly. Fortunately, I'm not in the highlight reel too much, but he's, again, just a different level.
The next one is composure and mentality. I think this feels quite similar to some of the reasons that you've given for game intelligence, having that kind of influence on the pitch, on your teammates as well.
Yeah, maybe I'll change it. Maybe I'll go George Ford for the vision. I'll put Owen Farrell here. Again, like composure, undeniable. Some of the kicks he slotted, that second test in New Zealand for the Lions, ridiculous pressure, no issues for him. And then his influence on the team was always ridiculous. Like he's just got a way of communicating that gets people in the right space. And whether that's passed on from his old man or learned himself, it's a ridiculous skill set to have.
Next one is power and tackling.
I want to throw Marrow in here, but I think this might be one for Courtney Laws. Yeah. Just got flashbacks of a game we played in where they kicked the ball off and he absolutely killed me off the ball. He didn't even get a yellow card for it, which was brutal. But he's insane. I've got no more superlatives left for someone like him. He just does his thing, and
You don't want to put yourself in any of the categories. So what could you take? Which of your attributes could you bring into that rugby player that we're creating?
Rehab specialist?
No, see, you said in your own statement, this is not a sob story. My career is not defined by my injuries.
I'm joking. I'd like to think I would have got to the top 5 of a footwork element of it. That was an area I prided myself in. But I'm not putting myself ahead of Jason Robinson or Cheslin Colby, so top 5 I can deal with.
Yeah, a top 3 if you've only got 2 ahead of you.
I'm sure there'll be some other people I've forgotten.
But that is a player built on balance, control and impact. Performance by design, just like Audi. We talked about, you talked about rehab, and there was one injury that was a step too far for you, and you've stepped away from the game because of that back injury at the end, and you've talked a lot about the pain that you were feeling at that stage. Just tell me a little bit more about it.
I was battling it from January. After I had the surgery in January 2024, I was up against it a little bit. I was feeling things that weren't normal, pain down your leg, all that type of stuff, but was able to live a normal life and manage it through training and stuff like that, but not in a way that was brilliant for my long-term ability to perform. Like, I wasn't able to spend however long I wanted to after training on the field doing extras and stuff like that, which is always an area I loved doing and felt gave me a lot back. And then eventually it got to, through various injections and stuff, it would get better, and then it would get worse, and then it would get better. And then in December, I played a game against Sale, and it was just, I knew I was really, really, really up against it at this point. On the bus on the way up to Manchester from Leicester, I couldn't sit down on the bus. So I was lying down in the middle of the walkway, but I really didn't want to let the team down. I'd missed games before. I'd missed the whole of last season, so I really didn't want to pull out. And the guilt was killing me of letting my team down and being that guy who's always injured and never playing. So I got on the bus, lay down, got the way up there, was up in the 2-3 in the morning, taking painkillers to go back to sleep, and then still somehow wanted to play. So I lay down on the bus to the way to the game, and somehow got through the warm up and was thinking at this point still I really shouldn't play in this game. But again, didn't want to. I hated missing games, and I hated missing games last minute as well and pulling out, and then someone else having to jump in last minute and deal with the repercussions of me pulling out. So I just got through it, and I may as well have not been on the pitch, to be honest with you. I was a zombie. Like it was completely pointless. But after that, I knew that something serious was going on, and this wasn't right. And I went to see the surgeon, and he said, "Look, unless you want to, have multiple back surgeries, I think this is time for you." And again, I said it, and I'm very open about the fact that I'm happy he took the decision out of my hands, because I would have tried to find a way to carry on playing, and it would have been the wrong decision. So I'm very happy it was done that way. And yeah, look, everyone has to retire at some point. It's not like, this isn't sad. Like everyone has to stop at some point. Mine was earlier than I thought it was going to be. I was still able to do most things, and life's all right. It's not the end of the world.
It's still hard, and it is still difficult to come to terms with. Do you think you knew on some level, even before that game against Sale, did you think this might be the one? Yeah,
probably. Look, not being able to sit down is not normal. And then expecting to play 80 minutes of professional rugby whilst you're not able to sit down is ridiculous. So, yeah, I think that kind of preparation, not preparation because I didn't know categorically it was going to happen, but that kind of thought process about that this might be a reality definitely helps you deal with it 100%. And, whilst I wouldn't say it came as a shock, but it was like very much logic. And I was like, look, that's it, cool, move on. Like, there's no point dwelling on it or thinking about what if, because you can't go back and change it. So it's a waste of time.
Your whole identity, though, up to this point but a large part of your identity up to this point has been being a professional rugby player. It's being one of the best in the world at what you do. How do you make the next step?
Yeah, I think the identity piece is not a problem. Mm-hmm. I definitely always separated or tried to separate the identity of being a professional rugby player. Again, this might be a cliche, but everyone is human beings at the end of the day. It doesn't matter if you're a professional rugby player, professional footballer, or what it is. We're all normal people. So, I think focusing so heavily on you being based around your career is illogical when there's so much more to everyone than what they do. But the best in the world thing definitely is something that takes a while, because it's not like you can just jump into golf and become the best in the world of that, although I'm trying my absolute best. But that part is definitely hard to deal with, because you feel so much accomplishment that comes with being one of the best in the world at something. When that's gone, it's like, not that it's your identity, because I don't think it is, but it's something that gives you something back. So without it, it does feel a bit like, how am I going to excel? What can I really dive into now? But, you have to do it. It's not like I have a choice. It's not like I have to focus on something else. And, don't know, I am quite a logical person. I think that helps in situations like this.
And it's not been that long, but how have you found life off the pitch?
I think what helped is that I've absolutely loved it.
What have you loved about it?
I've loved having my own schedule and choosing where I go, what I do. No one telling me, eat this then, do this then.
That's interesting, because some people really miss that. They miss that structure in their life.
Yeah. No, I've loved taking control back and being able to play as much golf as possible. It's beautiful.
Has that surprised you, though, how much you've loved it?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. I thought it would be like that for the first 6 weeks, but now it's been, 5 months, and I still love it. And I still love, being able to go out and meet new people and learn new things, and just jump into a whole bunch of stuff. There's so much more to life and what you're doing than just your sport, your career. So I've enjoyed just trying to get as much information and learn as much as possible.
But you don't need to go too far away from it, because you're going to be a pundit for the next Lions tour. So tell me a little bit about what you think your skill set is in terms of being a pundit, because presumably you look at and have throughout your playing career looked at ex-professionals who are criticising players and thought, well, they don't know what they're talking about. So how do you avoid being that person?
I don't know, it's a tough question, that one. No, I think that...
This is what it's going to be like.
Yeah. No, I think in anything like that, I think you just got to try and be yourself. And I'm not one to point out, or make people who have made mistakes feel even worse or anything like that. Look, you have a duty as a pundit to educate and actually provide objective responses. So doing that in a way that's kind, I think, is important. But then I think also looking at things from a slightly different angle. I think the game has moved on so much in the last 3-4 years, let alone 10-15 years. I think that some of that needs to be reflected in some of the broadcast, and the same way in providing a bit of entertainment behind it, and moving things on. Rugby needs to get with it a little bit.
Because you're very interested in how you can grow the game, how rugby can kind of grow its audience and maybe target away from the traditional rugby union audience. How do you think that you and rugby can work together to do that?
I think that it's quite entrenched in rugby. It's not a quick fix. I think it's quite deep rooted, in my opinion. And I think that there's so many different branches of rugby that you can go into and talk about what they're doing wrong or what other sports are doing better. But ultimately, I think that they need to cater to a younger audience because, rightly or wrongly, I don't mean this in a morbid way, but some of the core rugby fans might not be around in 10, 15 years. So unless the sport moves on and captures some of this younger audience, there's going to be no rugby left. And I think to do that, the players have got to be allowed to speak freely in the media, and the media's got to be able to paint the correct picture of these players. So it's like a two-way street, I guess, with that relationship. But I think that would go a long way to fixing some of the issues with rugby, but also some of the outside biases that people have who aren't fans, who look at the game and think that it's only for this person and this person, when actually, oh no, that person is from near me or looks like me or talks like me. Oh, maybe I can do it, and then let me start watching it, and then, So I think that it's kind of a snowball effect, in my opinion. Because
one of the things that you've talked about is players being able to wear their own clothes to get, and it's not about just letting them wear their own clothes. It's about what that represents and sort of having a sort of more rounded view of the players and about learning a little bit more about them.
Yeah, it sounds so minor, but I think it's so important. I think it's freedom of expression. It's not putting everyone into a box. I know that there's a bit of, formality and business-like approach to everyone wearing the same thing, but I think that they do that on the pitch anyway. They're all wearing the same kit on the pitch, so why not let them show up in whatever they want and express themselves? And that I think that gets other stakeholders involved that previously would look at rugby in a completely different light. I think it's just a great opportunity. I know it's a small thing, but I think it could end up being a big thing.
Yeah, because of what it represents,
exactly.
Rather than the actual, sort of looking at what they're wearing. It creates idols in the way that you're talking about, even in a different way. When you look back at your career and you look back at the lessons that you've learned, you've talked about the importance of your family, from your parents and your brothers through to now your wife and your children, and the importance of having that around you and being a whole person. How do you think that the lessons that you've learned through rugby shaped the way that you are as a parent, do you think?
I would love to say it's made me more patient with the kids, but that is a flat out lie.
They're still very small.
They are, yeah. I think, again, it comes back to, this moment is here and it's gone. And if you don't try and enjoy it for whatever it is, then, you'll look back on it with some sour taste or some feeling. And I want to be able to look back at all the aspects of whether it's my kids, my parents, and knowing that I was around and I was able to be whatever person I am to them in that moment. And I think that that's the main thing I would say I've taken from it, because things can change so quickly.
Would you be happy if either of them wanted to go into professional sport?
I think professional sport, yes. Look, if my son wants to, or my daughter wants to play rugby, ideally golf, but whatever they want to play, I think that the lessons you learn from it are so important and so transferable to anything that even if they don't become professional, I think it makes you better at what you do end up doing. So, look, I'll be the first to drive him down to rugby, football, golf on a Saturday morning, as long as it's not before 8 a.m, because that's a red card in my house.
Have you had your 4-year-old on the golf course or at the driving range then?
He's got some clubs.
Yeah, I bet he has.
He's not got any rugby boots yet, but he's got some clubs.
That's the direction in which he's being gently led.
Exactly.
Yeah. One final question then, which is sort of linked, I suppose. If you could sit down with yourself at the start of your either at the start of your career or at the start of your path in rugby and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
I would think it would be that nothing is really that big a deal. I think that, like I was saying earlier, I think you can make things seem so dramatic and you can overthink things to the nth degree, but really you're going to wake up the day after and you're going to have to deal with either the good or the bad that happened. So just get on with it. And I think that that's definitely something that I would have told myself then, because I let things affect me for way too long. I let the good things affect me for way too long and the bad things affect me for way too long, whereas, just got to ride it, just go with the flow.
And what a career it's been.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on The Pursuit, brought to you by Audi, the official innovation partner of Sky Sports. Remember to subscribe on YouTube and follow on your favourite podcast platform so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on The Pursuit.